Good evening, everybody. Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to this second Hunter Mill Budget Town Hall. This is one we are doing virtually. So I am here in my office, but I expect many of you are at home and maybe thinking, I wish I were outside right now in this beautiful weather. But thank you very much for joining this tonight. We do have some background information that that county staff will be providing on the budget. We also will have school board member Melanie Meren from the Hunter Mill District will be joining us here shortly. And we will also have instructions on how you can participate through a question and answer process. I'm going to ask Paul from my office to talk about that. But any questions? If you have a question about the process, go ahead and raise your hand electronically, or if you have your screen on, you can raise it in person or in real life too. Okay, then Paul, I would ask, can you just explain to folks how they can, when we get to the Q&A portion, how they can get in the queue or provide their question for me, Melanie Meren, or county staff?
Sure. So you can either provide your question in the chat and we'll take it through the queue, or you can use the raise hand feature and we'll call on you and you're able to provide a question that way. If you have additional questions or you don't feel comfortable putting it in during the meeting, you also can email us at huntermill@fairfaxcounty.gov. This meeting is recorded and we will have a transcript of it as well. So we'll be following up at the conclusion of the meeting.
Great, thank you very much, Paul. So we'll go over that process again after we hear from county staff, and hopefully Melanie Meren will be here and do a brief presentation for the school board as well. So at this point, Joe, are you going first or Katie today?
Supervisor, I'll kick it off and I'll share the screen. I'll take the first half and Katie take the second half.
Sounds good. All right, Joe, take it away.
All right, sounds good. Good evening, everybody. Joe LaHate and Katie Horseman here from the Fairfax County Budget Office. We've got a series of slides we'll run through in a pretty quick fashion to ensure we've got enough time thereafter to assist Supervisor Alcorn with any questions you may have. These are abbreviated from the county executive's presentation back in February when he first unveiled the budget. But essentially looking at the first slide, you can see here kind of an executive summary. The county's real estate tax base is up pretty strong, over 5%, but that is largely due to the residential assessments being high. Commercial, non-residential is not doing very well. All in revenues from real estate do account for about 2/3 of our total county revenue base, so significant. And all that additional revenue source year over year, for the most part, goes to schools. That's our largest transfer out, otherwise known as going to their operating expense side. Roughly about 4.5% each in terms of splitting that revenue share. One of the biggest things you'll see here is funding for the county's compensation program. We have 2 union contracts with both our fire and police unions. This fully funds them. We have an additional 1/4 penny on top of the existing 1 penny right now dedicated to affordable housing, one of our main priorities from the Board of Supervisors. In addition, probably the most notable piece here, the county's current tax rate is $1.12.5 in the current fiscal year right now. The county executive has proposed a 1.5 cent increase to $1.14 as part of the FY26 advertised budget plan you're going to see tonight. Coupled with that, we also did recommend an increase in the transient occupancy tax, otherwise known as the hotel tax, going essentially from 4% to 6%, puts it generally a little bit more on par with other jurisdictions in the regions. Coupled with that, this past late summer, early fall, we began a pretty thorough conversation with county departments who were asked to make reductions totaling 10% of their respective operating budgets. The net result of all that translated to about $60 million that we used, cuts we took from them to help balance the budget this year, not solely rely on revenue and rate adjustments. We'll go into those a little bit further, coupled with 208 positions that they have that we're taking with those cuts. Giving you an idea in terms of revenue growth, what drives the available dollars that we have to spend year over year for those various categories, personnel, contracts, et cetera. Anywhere between, low in 2021 at 0.8 up to about 7.3% was probably our biggest high, rebounding from the pandemic. But the last couple of years really settling anywhere between about 3 and 4% roughly on average. Next slide, just to give you an idea, like I said before, what are the major revenue drivers and categories in our budget? As I said before, real estate is about 2/3 of the whole base. It's about almost close to 80% on the residential side, less than 20 on the commercial side. Personal property, otherwise known as car values, sales tax, and business licenses, otherwise indicative of what's going on in the region from an economic perspective. And investment interest, again, what we earn on the cash that comes in on a month-to-month basis, driven largely by rate increases by the feds in the last couple of years. But I think a little bit of drop-off that we're expecting over the course of the next several months and into the current fiscal year. On the next slide, again, just to give a little perspective in terms of, like I said before, 1 cent on the county's real estate tax rate is about $34 million, whether you go up or down. The current rate is about $1.14 based on that 1.5 cent increase. It does, again, based on average assessed values. It's not meaning it's exact value in everyone's neighborhood, but from a countywide average that we got, it translates to about a $638 increase on the average residential property owner, taking a combination of the growth in value plus the increase in the rate. Again, as I cited before, the overall value of commercial is actually down, roughly about 15.6 in the current year, down to about 14.8 estimated in FY26. And we just give a little bit of historical perspective here in terms of where values have gone. You can see from a residential perspective, things have climbed rather positively in the last several years. From a non-residential perspective, we've had some negative growth over the last couple of years, indicative of challenges within the office market. On the next slide here, we try to give you a sort of a snapshot. If you start with a county budget of roughly about $5.6 billion, and we generate about an additional $260 million, we just want to give you kind of a high-level perspective, and it'll follow in the next several slides in terms of where those dollars go. So we, again, as I said before, we split the revenue growth between the schools and the county side. From a school's perspective, essentially goes to the operating transfer to pay for their operations annually. From the county perspective, you can see we kind of run it through a variety of categories here. Largely goes to compensation-related pieces, paying the employees, retiree health insurance, the whole 9 yards, debt service, and variety of facilities, so on and so forth. Ultimately netting down to some reductions to give an idea in terms of what our hold is at the end of the day. Schools does remain our largest transfer out and share of the disbursement slice, and we fully fund our reserves based on best practices that we need to adhere to from the bond rating agencies in New York. Again, on the next slide here, really, we've got about $119 million more to go towards the school system over last year. The superintendent had asked for about $268 million. So we've got a delta here of about $149 million. I think that the challenge here, when we put this budget together, was there was going to be increases, notably on the backs of the residential homeowner. How much more could we go to impact them? And that, I think, is probably the main driver in terms of why we only funded about 118 out of the $268 million request from the superintendent. But I'll hold there. I know there'll be some further discussion from the school side to kind of talk further on that. And on this slide, again, as I mentioned before, county compensation, trying to retain and recruit employees has been a challenge in the last several years. On the union side, we've got both contracts in the second year of 3-year contracts, both police and fire. This essentially funds all components associated with those contracts as we agreed to when we first entered into those contracts with them. Reviewed on an annual basis for funding wise. In addition, from a county perspective, the general employees, we are not unionized, but there are adjustments in here as far as a COLA and the standard merit and longevity and performance increases accordingly. And lastly, there's roughly about a $27 million adjustment out of that $123 million total that goes towards increased retirement contribution rates toward the retirement plans and health insurance costs. And if you switch just in terms of kind of from an operating perspective, if you vote in the fall, there's always a series of candidates you're looking to vote for, but there are also questions on the ballot that essentially ask you whether you now would give a yay or a nay vote to various categories from both county and school perspective to fund capital projects. This ultimately is the fruit of all that. The total dollar increase in the debt service payments over last year is about $15 million, about 8.6 for the county, 6.7 for the schools. This past January, we did sell $400 million in bonds based on those prior authorizations that we had gotten from voters at the polls in November. And for the most part, we kind of just update these things on a year-by-year basis. But if it's an odd number calendar year, there'll be a schools question on the ballot. If it's an even number calendar year, there'll be county questions on the ballot. So we just kind of lay those out here just to give an idea. And this is reflected further in the county's capital improvement program as well, too. Now, the next slide, I'll switch it over to Katie for the second half.
Okay, thanks, Joe. So for the rest of the presentation, I'm just going to walk through some of our specific expenditure requirements, and then along with ways everyone can get involved as we work through the budget season and next steps in the process. So first we have affordable housing. So the last 3 fiscal years or so, the board has directed staff to increase baseline budget for affordable housing with the goal of getting to 2 pennies on the real estate tax rate by fiscal year 2027. So the last couple of years, we haven't been able to add any baseline investments, but this year, the county executive was able to dedicate an additional $0.25 penny or $8.5 million. That brings total baseline funding to $0.25 penny or just over $42 million. So even though we haven't been adding baseline resources, we have been adding one-time resources. So in total, we have allocated over $97 million to affordable housing since fiscal year 2022. And that was a combination of county dollars, about $42 million. And then we were also able to really tap into some of our stimulus funding. So $55 million of our ARPA allocation went to affordable housing. Now, I will say, we do still have a delta of $25 million to get to that 2 pennies of baseline funding. Early projections right now, looking at fiscal year 2027, we are not anticipating significant revenue growth again. So meeting that mark may be challenging for us. So for new facilities, we had 2 new facilities opening. So the rest of our funding adjustments really were focused on critical needs that the county had to fund. 2 of those were the new facilities that were opening, which is just under $5 million. So we have Kingstown Complex, which is actually a co-location for several services that the county offers. First, we have our Center for Active Adults. So that facility was actually expanding in size with the renovation. So we needed to add some positions and funding to support the new programming. We do have a new childcare center, which will serve 38 children. So we added some baseline funding for that. And then the Kingstown Library, which is being expanded from a community branch to a regional branch. All total, this budget, I should say, has 9 new positions. 5 of those went to new facilities. So the other 4, 2 are in our retirement agency, and that's not supported by the general fund. That's within its own fund and self-supporting. And then we have 2 in circuit court as a result of a state mandate that came down and is effective as of July 1st. The second new facility was our Fair Ridge Family Shelter. So that's our new family shelter that was made possible by purchasing the Extended Stay America. So in order to run that facility, we did need to add some baseline funding. And that facility is actually scheduled to open in early April. So that will be coming online this fiscal year in the next month or so. So all other adjustments in the budget total about $41 million. And they're really in 4 broad categories of increases. First one is inflation and contract rate adjustments, and that totals $16.2 million. And these are really for our personnel-based, primarily human services contracts. Just like people at home are seeing inflation, the county is too. We also had a pretty significant increase in our body-worn cameras. That contract was expiring, and in the first 5-year contract, we got a really good deal. And then as we start our next phase, we did have a significant increase in that contract. We also have just under $11 million in some of our IT enhancements that we need to make. And this is really to support our architecture optimization. And then as IT projects are completed and rolled out to the agencies, what we're seeing is we need to have yearly maintenance and ongoing licensing costs associated with that new technology. We have just over $10 million for county operations, which is including some of our lease escalations or maintenance needs at new or some of our expanded facilities. We had a significant investment in fuel. Our baseline fuel costs the last couple of years have been significantly lower than the average price per gallon that we're paying. And then we had some increased needs for library security. And then last on there is $3.8 million. Most of these adjustments, the board took action on at carryover, and it's just us needing to add that baseline funding. And it was really just to address some state and federal mandates or the expiration of some grant funding. And the two big ones there are the fire and rescue department had to stand up their own pharmacy based on a change in federal policy. So we had some resources for that. And then we had some expiring grant funding for victims of crime. So we need to add those resources as well. So moving on to reductions, like Joe mentioned, when we finished actually our 25 budget, the county executive realized right away that we weren't looking at significant revenue increases in 26. So he did direct all county agencies to develop a 10% budget reduction options. So agencies worked on that process throughout the summer and then submitted it to DMB. DMB then reviewed all of the requests and really worked back and forth with them to make sure we understood the requests, what the impact to the community, to the county on operations, service delivery, and then presented all of the reductions to the county executive. And in total, the county executive decided to take 3.4, felt he needed to take 3.4% of the 10%. So the county executive originally requested a 10% reduction options, and what the county executive ended up including in his proposed budget was 3.4% of those reductions. It does total though $60 million and 208 positions. And I should say this is our highest level of reductions that we've taken since fiscal year 2010, but this is also our third year of reductions. So in fiscal year 2024, we had some across the board reductions totaling about $6 million. In fiscal year 25, we had $34 million in reductions, and those were really primarily focused on efficiencies and cost savings. And then this year we have the $60 million. So all total, the last 3 years, we are looking at approximately $100 million in reductions. On the position side, like I said, there were 208 positions. Right now, less than half are filled, and our Department of Human Resources is working to try to place those incumbents in another county position, so no one actually is out of a job. So moving on to revenue diversification, in the fall, the board asked us to look at any revenue diversification options that we might have, because as everyone knows, we're heavily reliant on the real estate tax rate. So one of those options was the food and beverage tax. That right now, a food and beverage tax is not included in the advertised budget. The county executive put it forward as something that could be implemented if the board wanted to take action on it. It would not be implemented until January of 2026. And that's really just to give staff or time to set up and hire staff to actually manage the program. And then there's also an IT component to accept that revenue into the county system. So that wouldn't take effect until January of 2026 if the board decided to go forward with it. They did vote yesterday to advertise a food and beverage tax, and that just means we can continue the conversation as to see whether the board actually wants to take action and implement a food and beverage tax. But to give some perspective, a 3% tax rate would generate just over $48 million. And when Joe talked about that tax rate increasing by $0.015, a 3% food and beverage tax would eliminate that tax rate increase. If we had a 4% tax, that would generate just over $65 million. And that actually would reduce the tax rate by an additional ½ cent. So in total, you'd be looking at 2-cent tax reduction from the county executive's proposed rate. The other thing about the food and beverage tax is it does diversify, and about 34% of the food and beverage tax would be generated from people outside of the county. So looking forward, so this budget, we start our budget process actually right when, the board adopts the budget. So we start back in May working on the new budget. So we are actually done. We finished in early winter. This budget does not take into account any of the federal action, specifically any action from the new Trump administration. So we are closely watching any actions and any impacts that come from that to make sure that we can adjust as needed or necessary. We have had a number of committee meetings. We've already had 2. One was meeting with the school board in February. The next one is March 25th. And that's when the board will discuss budget issues in more detail. Like I said, not only did the board recommend moving forward with advertising a food and beverage tax, but they also took action on the real estate tax rate and then transient occupancy tax yesterday. They did decide to advertise the county executive's proposed rate at $1.14 for the real estate tax rate and that increase in the transient occupancy tax rate. In terms of how to provide input to the budget, you can see there are a number of ways, whether it's by email, phone, online, or text options. There's also the public hearings, which are coming up. If you would like to provide testimony at the public hearings, you do need to call the clerk's office to sign up to testify. They are April 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. And then all of the budget town halls for all of the district supervisors are listed online. And of course, the complete advertised budget can be found at the link below. And then just really quickly talking about our timeline. Again, yesterday was an important day because the board took action on what they were going to advertise tax rates. Advertising a tax rate does not mean that's what they are going to implement. It just means that they cannot go any higher than what they've decided to advertise. So they did take action on that yesterday. Again, we do have our public hearings coming up on April 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. The board has markup on May 6th, and that's really when they do the bulk of the work. And they don't take formal action on the budget, but they do take action on the budget, and then it gives staff a week's time to actually make all of the adjustments in the system. So the budget is not formally adopted until May 13th, but really all of the work is done by May 6th. And then, of course, the new fiscal year starts on July 1st. So with that, I will turn it back over to you, Supervisor Alcorn.
Thank you very much, Katie. Before we move ahead, I do want to thank you, Katie, and Joe, and the rest of the team at the Department of Management and Budget. No matter what you think about Fairfax County's spending policies or tax policies, everybody agrees we have a fantastic staff for our Management and Budget Office. You guys are part of a long tradition of excellent staff work over the years and decades. So thank you very much for everything that you do on that. I do not see that Melanie has arrived. I don't think she is here yet, at least as far as I can tell. I did want to just spend a couple of minutes. Let's see if she does arrive. I wanted to spend a couple minutes talking about what some of the things that I heard at the in-person Hunter Mill Town Hall last Wednesday. I heard a number of folks concerned about specific cuts in the budget, particularly cuts such as the middle school after school program. Did hear from a number of school system folks, teachers, concerned that there is not enough money to fund the salary increases negotiated in their first collective bargaining contract with the school system. I also heard concerns about the real estate tax and the burden it bears, and some of the overall spending concerns of the county overall. So there were a lot of specific questions, a lot of other specific issues that were identified as well. But tonight is a different night. Let's see, folks could have different issues, concerns tonight. And So I wanted to see, I just wanted to see if Melanie is on. There are a few folks that have just called in. So I don't think any of those are Melanie, but wanted to make sure. Okay, then let's go ahead then and I don't want to waste anyone's time. Let's go ahead and dive into Q&A and any comments that folks here at this town hall would like to make. Paul, could you? Okay, I just got a text from Melanie. She is going to be on within 10 minutes. But Paul, let's go ahead and start the Q&A process. Can you just remind could you just remind folks how they can participate, and then I'll do my best to field the questions and perhaps call in Joe or Katie or Melanie when she's here as appropriate. Paul, go ahead.
Sure. So individuals can submit questions via the Microsoft Teams system by using the raise hand function. And you click that and then we'll pick, choose your topic, or you can submit questions through the chat. And so we want to keep the chat clear, keep it just questions, comments. Again, you also have the option of sending comments or questions directly to us through the Hunter Mill email box, which is huntermill@fairfaxcounty.gov. Also, want to put a plug in for our newsletter, where you can find information about what we do in the office and ongoing budget deliberations.
Great. Thank you, Paul. All right, I see the first question in the chat. Are we considering a food and beverage tax? The answer is yes, we are. And I spoke to this yesterday. One of the things that has been a long-term concern of mine is our overdependence on the real estate tax. And I know the meals tax is not popular, but given where we are in terms of the burden on the real estate tax and some of these critical services that we're trying to fund, I did support advertisement of the real estate tax. And frankly, I'll pass along something else that I said. We advertised a maximum of a 4% meals tax at the board yesterday. And I know this is not going to make me popular with a lot of folks, but I actually suggested that, and let folks know that I would actually have preferred to go higher. We could go up to 6% on the meals tax. I was hoping that we could advertise at least 5%. And in part, as I said yesterday, we have had a program where we funded literally thousands of affordable housing units in the county through something Jerry Connolly got started a number of years ago, basically the penny, as we call it. It's a dedicated penny of the real estate tax dedicated to affordable housing. It's been extremely successful. Frankly, I would like to see more funds going to affordable housing. But I think this is a good example of where we could really use tax reform and move the cost of that affordable housing program off of the real estate tax, which, by the way, hits residential real estate more than commercial real estate, at least by the percentage of funds that come in, and move that to a meals tax. So we'll still probably have some discussion about this at the Board of Supervisors, but by limiting a meals tax to no more than 4% this year, which is what we've done, I think it limits how much of that type of reform we're going to be able to do, but we'll see. This is a board. I am not a mayor. I am a member of a 10-member Board of Supervisors, so our decisions are according to a majority vote of the Board of Supervisors. So that's the background on that. Yep, meals tax is not popular. I am not surprised. Okay, question: how much has been cut from police, courts, and emergency response budgets? Katie, do you want to, or Joe? Yeah, Joe, do you want to take that one? Either one.
Yeah,
I am. Go ahead, Joe.
Okay, yeah, I'll send a link after, but the highlights here right now, police took roughly about $11.5 million. Fire took about 12 million, and courts have got roughly about a little over $500,000-ish. I may be slightly off on that. We have a separate document that breaks out by every single department. I'll paste that link into the chat right now. If folks want to know a little more detail by some of the details, excuse me, of that $60 million total and cut. Katie, help correct me if I'm off.
Yeah, so courts, and again, rounding, you can drill down once Joe puts the link in there, is about $1 million. And then on the public safety side, it's about $29.3 million between the two, between all public safety agencies. So definitely public safety. I mean, when you look at as a percentage of our budget, they're a significant piece of our general fund budget. So it's not all that surprising that in order to get to $60 million of cuts, you are going to see a fair amount in your public safety arena and your human services arena, because that's where a big piece of our budget, that's, you know, the two biggest pieces of our budget are human services and public safety.
All right. Thank you very much, both of you. I'm going to do one more question from the chat, and then we'll switch over. I see a couple of electronic hands that have been raised. And by the way, thank you for folks. I see some comments pro and con on the meals tax. Thank you very much. I do see those. Here's someone, I have a concern about DOGE and how many people might lose their government jobs and further decrease revenue from the residential tax base. Has there been any analysis on this? Boy, that's a great question. It's definitely top of mind. We've talked about this at a couple of committee meetings recently. And most of our discussion to this point has been on how we can somehow avoid the most serious impacts and help the people that have been affected by these actions by the federal government. This is tough. This also came up at the first budget town hall, and some very frank discussion about you know, what would we do if we see a serious economic impact of these cuts and the actions that the administration has taken. That's something well, I don't know. Joe, do you want to touch on that? I know for emergencies, we have reserves, and historically we've just had to adjust as the, you know, we have to balance our budget. We don't have any choice on that. Joe, do you want to address a little bit of that, what we've done historically anyway?
I think, Supervisor, there's been precedent, right? Either call it the Great Recession, sequestration, or the pandemic. And in each and every case, we had to have mandatory % reserve set aside for best practices with the rating agencies. And I think even on top of that, we set up even additional reserves. We set up pandemic reserves, sequestration reserves. We just put an updated revision, otherwise known as our third quarter review, for our revised pieces to our current fiscal year budget, where we actually do recommend to the board, there's some money we had recommended available for you to consider for spending, but at the same time, we kind of want to say caution. You might want to consider setting up another reserve in the same fashion that we've done in some of these prior instances. Coupled with that, we monitor every single revenue category on a monthly basis. I think the most clear things you're going to see are sales tax. Are people spending less? Business license updates. How are they doing year over year compared to last year? Hotel taxes. Are people traveling? Those are the kind of things we look at from a regional perspective to see, is there any, you know, economic impact that we're seeing right away? Coupled with the fact that obviously as things progress and come out with unemployment claims over the course of the next couple of months, anything we get in those factors, we revise our revenue projections immediately. I wouldn't be surprised if we have to do so again as we get closer to budget adoption later this summer. When we do our end of the year carryover review, we've got an ability to update those revenue forecasts again. So anytime we've got an ability to present to the board updates, we will do so in a really conservative and realistic fashion.
Okay. All right, good. Let me make sure I'm off mute there. Thank you very much, Joe. And just FYI on that one of the items I've been watching, there's a website that I'll put a link in the chat on the number of open positions in Northern Virginia. In January, that number was about 92,000 open jobs. It had dropped to 42,000 as of about a week ago. I just checked it. It's at 45,000, which I don't know if that makes a trend, but All right, let's hopefully keep going in that direction. But I'll put that there. That's something that I know is of major concern to all of us. I'm going to go to take a few questions here from people who've raised their hands. I see Abigail Johnson. If you want to unmute yourself, feel free if you want to turn your video on or not. It's up to you. But go ahead and ask your question or make your comment, please.
Hi, sure. Thank you. I'm going to keep my camera off since it's 7:40 at night. Spare
No
you all
problem.
the visual. I moved to Reston about 2 years ago after living and working overseas for non-governmental organizations for the past 15 years. I moved here. I had a job with the government. And on theme with the conversation that you all have just been having, I was fired 3 weeks ago as a result of President Trump's executive orders. My husband also lost his job with the dismantling of USAID. Sorry, it's all really raw and it's a lot that we're going through right now. We are doing our best to find new jobs as quickly as possible, but our skills are not as transferable as one would like to think, and it's taking some time. And I wanted to, we've been looking at our bills and our expenses, and the real estate tax is one of our largest bills. So I wanted to let you all know that there does seem to be a very large burden on the real estate tax. And I assume that our situation is not very unique and that this is going to create a concern for other people and not just us. So I wanted to tell my story and put it out there. Thank you.
Abigail, thank you for telling your story. My heart goes out to you and your husband, and you're not alone. I know you have a lot of colleagues that have also lost their jobs. There are other departments and agencies that are experiencing similar attacks, I'll call it. I have, and I would hope, and I would encourage anyone in such a situation to pursue all legal remedies associated with that. I think we all realize, or most of us realize, that many of the actions that are being taken in the name of waste, fraud, and abuse are actually actions that overstep the legal authority of the administration. And I would very much encourage you to pursue all administrative and other remedies available. I would also encourage you to share your story in forums or fora, I guess, like this, because I think it's important for us all to know what's happening out there. And I would encourage you to call members of Congress as well and make sure they know your story. There is a lot of work going on behind the scenes to compile stories and cases, and if you will, to flood the zone on the reverse, so that it's not just playing defense. So, but in terms of your personal situation and the fact that you're a homeowner and subject to the real estate tax, I hear you. And I very much appreciate you sharing that. Thank you. Let's go to Doug. You want to go next? Go ahead and unmute yourself.
All right. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Good evening, everybody. I have 2 children. One is in elementary school. One will be going into middle school next year. I was going to put this in the chat, but my chat wasn't working. So I just wanted to reinforce some of the comments people have had in other forums about the after-school activities with middle school. I know particularly my children are behind on some developmental skills just from COVID and online learning. And I'll just ask that the circumstances, again, don't penalize the kids to develop socially and learning the essence of teamwork with after-school activities. So I know you have a lot on your plate, but I just wanted to put my voice out there just as one of the many parents that rely on these activities for the assistance and development of our children. So appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you, Doug. I really appreciate you flagging that. I did hear and have heard both before and and after the last town hall similar concerns. So thank you. And before we go to the next person, I wanted to see. I see Melanie Meren has joined us. Melanie, I wanted to before we get too far into the Q&A, I wanted to see if you wanted to make do a presentation or make any comments, share any thoughts at this point.
Thank you so much, Supervisor Alcorn. And I'm late because there was a lot going on in our South Lakes Pyramid tonight, International Night and Rising Seventh Graders Night and sports. So I wanted to be there to support our community. And we do have such robust schools. I'm happy to share the presentation that was prepared. I assume you've done that already, you and your team, Supervisor?
Yeah, Joe
Okay.
and Katie went through. So, but if you want to do it, it's up to you.
I guess I could condense the one that I did the other night just to maybe show the slides real quickly so people get a lay of the land, because I know obviously the tax rate is on everyone's mind and I'd like to educate people on, you know, what our taxes go to. So that would be great. Thank you for that flexibility. I'm just wondering, is everything in black and white or is it just my screen?
Actually, I'm seeing beautiful color.
Okay. Well, it looks like the beginning of the Wizard of Oz for me, but that's okay. All right. So hello. It's so great to see so many of you online. And I know some of you, it seems, already have questions about our schools. I'm Melanie Meren, so I'm Walter's counterpart on our Fairfax County Board. And as some of you may know, we receive a transfer from the county to pay for our schools, and that is the biggest source of funding for our schools. So this, am I advancing the slides, or is that someone? Okay, someone else is. Thank you. So the 4 priorities that our superintendent proposed and which the board did approve to go over to the Board of Supervisors, 4 priorities: provide competitive compensation for all of our employees because we are not at the top in the region. Meet the changing needs of our Fairfax County young people and families. Day by day, we know the needs are changing. We just heard that. We want to fortify educators to teach all learners. We know now more than ever how to reach children who maybe have reading difficulties or other needs, but our teachers need to know how to do that work. And then we want to continue multi-year investments that optimize student learning, and there are no new investments. Next slide, thank you. So your public school division, we are the 9th largest school division in America. We steward $13 billion in public assets. That's over 200 buildings and grounds, educates 181,000 children and employs 40,000 adults, the 3rd largest employer in Virginia. So we have a large role to play in the state. Thank you. Next slide. And then just again, some of those numbers and those buildings. Thank you. Just to know, the buildings actually are not included in this $4 billion budget. That's part of the bond program that hopefully when you go to vote each year, there's a bond on the bottom or the back of the ballot, and that's what funds renovations. And we had over 500,000 events in our school facilities in 2024, in addition to the daily instruction. So our schools really are such an important part of our community, 7 days a week and used many, many hours of the day. Thank you. So this is, though, like a lot of things in education, there has not been enough funding for our facilities. And this is, you know, the state and the federal certainly have not provided enough. So we are struggling to make sure that we have the most modern and safe buildings. So I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you. We are, you know, in the middle of the pack when it comes to the cost to educate each student, about $21,000. So you can see we're not the most, we're not the least. I hope you'll see in the next slides that we aim to be very lean with the investments. I did just want to quickly share, you know, there are many ways that we can evaluate our students and how they learn. This is just one, the pass rates on 3rd grade reading. And although we are the largest, the highest on this chart, we certainly want to get to the top of the chart. And that's why we are investing so much in literacy, which is critical. There's been a big, you know, kind of revolution in how we teach literacy in America, and it has resulted in a Virginia Literacy Act. And by law, we need to change how we're teaching teaching, and there are some resources, but it takes time for teachers to learn how to do this work. So if you have those early release Mondays, we just had one this week, that's when our teachers are learning these best practice strategies, and it's really making an impact. It's life-changing work, so it's incredible. Okay. Also wanted to mention that we have the lowest ratio of central management. So we don't have a bloated central office. Most of our resources are really in the classrooms with our students, and that's on the next slide. Again, we have the highest percent of school-based employees. Now for the savvy data reader here, you'll see that these percentages are not too far apart on this chart. I will admit that, but it does show that we try to maximize every dollar to go to our schools and our students. Now, what I do want to point out is something that, you know, we in the county are united on, and that is that we get far too little funding compared to the national average. So whereas other places get, you know, that national average amount, a place like West Virginia is actually funding 11% more it gets in funding per student. Kentucky is even above us, even though it's under the national average. So we have 14% less than a national average per student. And unfortunately, that has meant that you local taxpayers are paying the burden, and nobody likes that. Next slide, please. So this study came out 2023. It was ordered by the State General Assembly. It's the Joint Legislative and Research Commission, and it showed without a doubt that the formulas that are used to calculate local education funding are woefully off, like woefully. And so again, that now shows us how much locally is being spent to make up that difference to be at that national average. But in Virginia and Fairfax, we don't want to just be average. We want to be exceptional. So if you next slide, please. So what that means for us is that Fairfax now spends 117 more locally. That's over $1 billion above what the state thinks it costs to provide education in Fairfax County. So if the governor of Virginia authorized the funding at the true cost of an excellent public education in Fairfax County, you would see a reduction of over $1,000 annually in property taxes. The governor did not propose funding any of the recommendations in this report. There were 16 recommendations. There is one recommendation that made it through the General Assembly for just $230 million. And that would change something that was put into place in 2009 and has continued to strain us. But we don't know if he's going to sign it or not. But we really appreciate our General Assembly trying to get something through. Okay. So our budget, the operating fund is $4 billion, and this is an increase over last year's approved budget, and it is a transfer increase of the amounts listed here. Again, I want to say, we know that the price of everything has gone up. Just for healthcare alone, the premiums are increasing 15.5%. So we have no control over that, and we are saddled with that, just like you all are. So, it is true that the county does continue to increase the amounts to the schools, but all of, our needs are changing and things cost more, and, the prices go up on our things that we must provide. The next slide is just a little more detail on how those 4 focus areas will be, broken out. So our competitive compensation, we want to our changing student needs, the ongoing investments like safety and security, and those multi-year investments as well. Okay, just to give you a sense, again, we're not even at that average when it comes to paying our master's teachers, so those with a master's degree. And if we want to be competitive, we really need to pay our teachers more. Especially in a time of a national teacher shortage. So this, again, just some info. Well, here if the budget is approved, we could be number 1, but currently we're at number 5 out of our area, comparison districts. Next slide. So again, that whole big chunk, 70% is from the county, and it's not sustainable. So, we're working together, but this is where we're at. So I do hope that there's more work that can be done in partnership together with the county to find some cost savings, whether it's operations or other programs. I'm not throwing in the towel yet on this budget work. So, but I really appreciate Walter Alcorn, inviting me here to share, and look forward to any questions. So thank you.
Melanie, thank you very much. Excellent slides, and thank you for providing some additional context, particularly the statewide issues and some of our state challenges. I did want to go back to the chat and pick up where we stopped, and then we'll also come back in a few minutes and get some of the people that have their hands raised. But we do have a question, Reshma, for the middle school after school program. What are the options that are being discussed to ensure that it does not get cut? Have real options been vetted with the FCPS school board for real alternatives to save it if the county hasn't figured out how to fund it? Yeah, we're looking to, I'm working to try to find funding for it. I know there have been some discussions between some county officials and school officials about maybe instituting fees for those that can afford it, but I don't know if that's a serious consideration at this point. Melanie, do you have any more info on that?
I don't. I mean, Supervisor, I appreciate you personally trying to figure out a solution. I think, it's our boards that as a whole need to do that work with our executives. And I have not been involved in that. So.
Okay. But yeah, Melanie and I and others are working to try to figure out how to make sure that program continues. It was started a good 15, 16 years ago, and I think it's been extremely successful. And it's very popular too. I've heard from a lot of folks, and I know Melanie has too. So let's see. Joe put in details by department for the reductions. Julianne had a comment. Thank you, Steve, on the meals tax. Okay. Kripa asks a question. I'm wondering about the status of curriculum advisory committees. What is happening with them? Melanie, do you have any insight into that?
Sure. So, hi, Kripa. Thank you, as always, for being engaged. So right now the board is, the school division, the superintendent is leading the effort to identify new math curriculum. And we're actually a year ahead of that because the superintendent has said and shown us that we've got to have our kids in much more rigorous math, more math. That's where the jobs are going to be. So there's a regulation that governs that process. And, we did it for social studies. We did it for literacy. And recently we have been looking at how the board uses community input. So there's that curriculum piece, the curriculum committee. And when that happens, each of us gets to appoint someone. And then that's governed by the superintendent. Like that's the superintendent's lane. But then we have these community advisory committees, such as our advanced academic program, which I'm missing tonight, but that's okay. And we have our student health advisory committee, our facilities planning, and those are the board's advisory committees. And they are not advising on instruction. So as we were reviewing these two bodies, we realized that our Family Life Education Committee was misplaced as a board advisory committee when it was really a curriculum committee that has a staff member that takes the recommendations to the superintendent. So we're basically kind of cleaning up the house. And we did this with our Human Resources Advisory Committee. We had to sunset that when we went into our collective bargaining agreement. So this is just the next step in sort of that housekeeping and being sure that the superintendent's, gets the info she needs and the board gets the community input we need. So I hope that clarifies it.
Thank you, Melanie. That's awesome. I'm glad you're on top of it. That's
process. Yes.
So just going through a few more of the chat comments. Diana says people can be helped by not taxing them so much. Thank you. Julianne says the current proposed budget shows full funding of the Fairfax County Police Departments and the Fairfax County Fire Department's collective bargaining agreements. Like those workers, Fairfax County Public Schools workers earned our CBA, that's collective bargaining agreement. What is your reasoning for not fully funding our contracts and underfunding the students we serve? I guess I'll answer that one and then go to the next one. We can only fund as much money as available. I said this and I kind of regret it after I said it, but I'll say it again because I said it last time. We're going to be raising taxes. this year. And it's really just a question of how much and which taxes, and trying not to do damage to people that are already overburdened, or frankly, the people like we've heard tonight that have lost their jobs with what's going on in the administration. So we're trying to manage all that, and including seeing, how much we can stomach in terms of these $60 million in cuts that are embedded in the county's proposed budget right now. So, and then the county executive's proposal allocates 49.06% of county revenue to FCPS. Joe, I thought I saw, was it your slide that had 51.5%? And I realized there may be a different way. I don't know, that maybe, does that include capital debt service or something? Does anyone know?
I think so. Yeah, I think if you're going operating, I believe it's probably 49. If you add the other pieces, I think it's a little higher. Obviously, but like you said, it does fluctuate year to year based on how much revenue is available. But I will say, whatever additional revenue is generated was given equal growth on both sides. But I know there were higher requests.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Joe. All right, let's try to move some of these. There are a bunch. Isn't it true that the incorporated towns in Fairfax, Herndon, Vienna, Clifton have a meals tax? Yes, it's true. And Vienna is in Hunter Mill District and in Fairfax County. So Vienna has really good restaurants too, by the way. So what is the big opposition to deny the county revenue from an incorporated as like Reston Town Center? I don't understand. Yeah, I mean, I get it. I understand. There's concern certainly from some restaurant owners. And obviously nobody likes taxes. It'd be a better world if we didn't have to pay taxes, but we have public services we need to fund. So yeah, I appreciate that comment. Another comment: with the cuts and anticipated cuts to environmental and climate programs from the feds, what is the county anticipating to sustain the county's environmental leadership? Great question. Some of it is going to necessarily, I think, be defensive. For example, I'm on the Regional Transportation Planning Board. That's and I'm throwing around a lot of acronyms, but that's the Metropolitan Planning Organization for the DC metro area. And there's a pretty radical change that's going on in terms of the federal approach to approving the statutorily required 5-year transportation plans for each of these metropolitan planning organizations like the TPB that I serve on. And the feds have let it be known, we're not going to pay for any climate work. We're not going to pay for any. So we locally have begun to incorporate climate considerations into our transportation planning, and we absolutely should. So we're now in sort of a process. We're trying to figure out how can we continue to do that through a process that, by the way, is 100% federally funded, when the federal government is saying don't do it. So we're sort of on a whole bunch of fronts figuring out how to keep the momentum going that we've started in Fairfax County and in other jurisdictions in the region towards mitigating our climate impact. I know the schools, and Melanie has been a champion of that as well. And I think it's a matter of really just doubling down on some of those efforts and using where we do have resources to make sure they get applied. So Eric, thank you. Thank you for that question. Melanie, you want to add anything more on that?
No, that's fine. Thank you. I'm okay.
Thank you to Abigail and your husband for your service. Yes, definitely. Corey is concerned about the middle school after-school cuts because I feel the age group doesn't have other options for extracurricular activities and very limited sports. I understand the limited sports they have come from a different budget. Is there an opportunity to look at a different revenue source if this budget does not support it? Good question. We talked, I think, a little bit about, some things that are being explored. I don't know, but it's a good question, and I think I'm committed to working with Melanie and others to make sure the program does continue in mostly its successful form, I would say, I would hope. Okay. Okay. Rashma echoes Corey's comments. Unsupervised 12 to 14-year-olds on our streets and houses is not an acceptable cut, to save $3.9 million. Have we accounted for what it's going on to take? It is going to take to keep them safe. These activities provide learning, social connection, safe spaces, enrichment, and so much more. Totally agree. Okay, and I'll take one more off here, and then we'll go to Julianne, who's been very patient with her hand up. What is the plan for reinventing our state governmental processes, not like the Trump team has done, thank you for that note, but in a humane way that also upskills those personnel who might be displaced and streamlines operations using new technologies? Instead of cutting, perhaps we can do more with better systems. I agree. I think and this is something Melanie, I believe, referred to earlier. We did, at the Board of Supervisors earlier this month, we did move forward with a couple of joint committees with the school board. One of the committees is going to be looking at facilities and how property and facilities can be, how we might be able to do better in a more coordinated way. And identify better efficiencies doing that. And the other is on IT and across county and schools on IT. I am going to be serving on that IT committee. I think that is one. There's been some efforts in the past. They're not easy. We're talking about completely different systems at this point that have developed and emerged over many years using not just independent management and staff, but different procurement systems, in many cases, different standards that are being used. But it's not going to be easy, but I think it's something we got to do. And Molly and I have talked about doing this actually for several years, and I'm glad our boards collectively are now on board to actually do this. Melanie, please.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I just add, a big part of that though is that the staff need to help us. We're the policymakers and we reflect what you all want us to advocate for, but the doing is the staff of the county and the schools. But the question about state, and how do we get more, I guess, better functioning, I see such a need for real leadership at the state level. FCPS, unfortunately, a few years back was employing someone who should not be employed to work with children. And there were so many breakdowns in every system, not only in the schools, but in our local police, but really most egregiously at the state. And there is a program called the FBI Rat Back program that provides real-time background checks, but it only works if everyone is in it. So everyone from the state, but also if you want to get interstate, you got to get everyone. And we've advocated for this for years to the governor, and he has not funded it. It's a public safety issue. Now, our superintendent has put in $400,000 annually going forward to provide this because we want to keep our kids and our adults safe. If we had state leadership that could really think about how to maximize an investment and provide a whole systems approach to the state, we could do better. But we don't have that executive at the state level now who is thinking, I'm just, the things I see coming out is just cut or not invest, but I don't see what the plan is. It's just, let's not do that. But what are we going to do with millions of students? They can't just roam around. So I think state leadership is the answer. And in a nonpartisan ad, I will say we vote every year in Virginia, every single year, general election.
Good call, Melanie. True fact. All right. Thank you. Let's go to Julianne. You've been very patient and had your hand up for several minutes. So go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
I sure can. Go ahead.
All right. So I'm with Fairfax County Federation of Teachers, and my question is, in districts right near us, Alexandria, DC, Loudoun County, etc. They have all got their contracts funded, and we have seen a retention rate. People are leaving working in our county to go into other counties because they get paid more. How are you going to value us and make sure that we are as equitable and that our contract gets funded and that we retain our teachers and staff?
Well, thank you for that question. And I guess the short answer is we're going to raise everybody's taxes to fund you as much as we can. And and I think it's just a question of how far we can go down that path.
Okay. All righty. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And Jill Norcross has her hand up. You've had it up not quite as long as Julianne, but a while. Go ahead, Jill.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Supervisor Alcorn, and your amazing staff who did a great presentation on the budget. Just grateful for the wonderful people we have working for Fairfax County, and thank you for our school board member, Melanie Meren, too, and very helpful to hear your explanation of the schools. So I just really wanted to kind of share my appreciation for the quarter penny for affordable housing. We know resources that Fairfax County dedicates to affordable housing, mostly in forms of loans, really is helping us move the needle on our housing challenges. So appreciate that commitment and the commitment for the new family shelter as well. And, also want to lend my support for the meals tax. I know it is not popular, but most of our surrounding jurisdictions do have a meals tax, and it doesn't seem to really affect restaurants too much. And of course, it is a choice if you want to eat out or not. So I do think it's wise that Fairfax try to take some of the burden off of homeowners as well. So just wanted to share my feedback on that. And thank you for trying to, I guess, raise the maximum level of the meals tax. I think it would have been good to have the ability to go up to 5% so we can try to balance the budget and not have as many cuts to human services and programs in the school. So thank you.
Thank you, Jill. I appreciate it. And I do, and I have to remind my colleagues every once in a while when they get frustrated with me on issues like you just raised, Jill. I represent Hunter Mill District. I mean, this is who we are. And I know we have a cross section of opinions on this call, and we do in our community, and I respect that. But we kind of have a tradition in Hunter Mill of trying to do more in terms of affordable housing and in terms of support for our schools, it is a little challenging because we do have a 10-person board, and we have to find those areas of agreement to move forward with anything like this. But Jill, thank you, and thank you for your advocacy on housing. It's greatly appreciated. I know by me anyway. So. Thank you. Let's hop back to a few more comments that are in the chat. Commissioner Alcorn, and I go by anything, by the way, that sounds fine. Thank you for opposing the development of the open space golf courses. Please keep up the fight. You're welcome, and I will. Thank you. Joseph Eisenberg, hi there. I'm Joe. Hi, Joe. A resident of Reston. I'm deeply concerned about the plan to close the employee child care center. My wife works for the county, and my daughter receives exceptional care at the ECCC. All the parents, teachers, and administrators were shocked to learn about this plan a couple of weeks ago. Please consider delaying this closure for a year and allow us a chance to propose increases in revenue and cost reductions related to the center. I also worry about the impacts this closure might have on the attraction and retention of quality county staff. Knowing that a demonstrative benefit can be erased at a moment's notice with no recourse would make me think twice about working for the county. We have the best employees in the region, and I'd hate to see that jeopardized. Thank you for that comment. I think that's very well said. I hear you. Katie or Joe, I don't know if you have any additional information on that proposed cut. Could maybe speak to that and flesh it out for the rest of us a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously knew that these weren't easy cuts. Employee Child Care Center is a great example of that. But I think, overall, when we were looking at cuts, right now, this is a program that is subsidized by the county. It's not full cost recovery. So that means parents who are paying the fee, it doesn't cover the full cost of how much it's costing the county to actually run. So if there's ideas out there, I know that we've had a couple of Q&As. If there's ideas out there to try to generate some additional revenue or cut costs, that certainly could be, I think, explored, definitely should be explored, because given the level of cuts that we were taking, and you can see that in some of the other cuts, to public safety, to middle school, after school, it was just, the goal was to make it a full cost recovery program.
Okay, and before I call on Melanie, Katie, what's the savings associated with that proposed cut? Do you have that?
So the savings, and this is on the NCS side, so that's the agency that runs the program. It's about $850,000. You do have to factor in the fringe benefit component as well, which is not included in the narrative write-up right now. We're actually working on a Q&A right now to get out to the board so they can see that full impact. But what's included in the NCS budget, who's operating the program, is about $860,000.
Okay, thank you, Katie. Melanie.
Yes. So, I'm just, as I'm listening, I hear us talking about cuts and I hear us talking about revenue generation, but I haven't heard much discussion about how we make things more efficient. And, Supervisor, I'm thinking about the solution that we came up with, which was we have high school students that want to go from the Herndon Pyramid to South Lakes for IB. And the FCPS policy does not provide transportation right now. Maybe that'll change. But we worked together with the connector bus and came up with a solution. And I wonder if that saved money, and I wonder if it's increased ridership. I'm not aware of any, kind of solutions that could really look at how we do business. And I have to mention, like, our permitting and our zoning, for our renovations and our building. There are so many instances where some of our school projects are held up, and that will increase the cost of materials and time. Our outdoor classrooms, we're still not permitted for those, and we approved those in 2022. So I'm just wondering, and I see Mr. Brian Hill is on, are there some cost-saving efficiencies being looked at so we don't have to cut and we don't have to look to the increased revenue as the only source of income?
I mean, and I would say the last, not this fiscal year, but fiscal year 24 and 25, we did take efficiencies and cost savings. It was about $40 million. There's certainly probably more work that can be done, but it would be more of a reorganization type thing rather than just decreasing agency budgets with no impact. And we knew that the reductions this year, we were out of those efficiencies and cost savings. So we did know that we really, unfortunately, were targeting service delivery and programs and impacting the community and impacting, county service delivery. But we're certainly always looking for reorganizations and ways to continue to cut and be more efficient.
Well, Supervisor, I'd love to share with you some data that I have that I think highlights where efficiencies could be had, especially, having a year and a half for permitting, to serve tens of thousands of students. It's not good for anyone. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I would love that, particularly anything that could help with the operating costs. That would be super, super helpful. So thank you, Melanie. And thank you for that question. And if others have ideas as well on where there can be efficiencies, I know some folks here that work for the county or work for the schools. And as you see ideas, feel free to share those with either of us or both of us. And if it's the type of thing you want to share without, pushing your name around, that's fine too. Frankly, we're all in on trying to find out ways to do things more efficiently and better in the interest of, well, frankly, the public. So let's keep going. We've got a few more messages, comments in the chat. Eric, to support and reinforce Lori Zell's comments, how does the proposed budget adapt to the radical changes the federal administration is putting forward? At this point, frankly, There's not anything specific in the budget. Joe had mentioned earlier that we might need to consider putting together, an additional reserve if we start to see some of the numbers really coming through that we're all worried and is going to happen, considering all the stories we're hearing and what we're seeing in the media. We did do something similar to that on pandemic. We did set up a pandemic reserve. The big difference we're going to have this time from at least the pandemic, the federal government was incredibly helpful during the pandemic financially, and really funded so many things. Thank you, federal government, for doing that. Thank you, Congress, for doing that. This is the opposite. This is the federal government causing the problems for us. Frankly, we are open to any suggestions on how we best might manage that. Obviously, we're going to have to be smart about how we manage the federal funding that we get and we want to continue to get across housing, across transportation, across other services. And then, of course, we're also in a long-term push to diversify our economy so that we're not overly dependent, as we currently are, on the federal government and federal government contracting. That's a huge long-term issue. I love the fact that down the street from my office in Reston is VW's North America headquarters. That's great. We need to do more things like that, where we have businesses here that are not wholly dependent on the federal government. But that's a long-term challenge. Okay, Melanie, got a thank you from Lori Zell. More support and concern about the middle school after school program being cut. Let's keep it up in the effort to ensure that it is retained. Okay, Kripa asked, what happens if somehow the Virginia General Assembly votes yes on a casino in Fairfax County next year and the governor signs it into law? To be clear, I oppose it as far as I can tell everyone else. Repping me does too. Thank you, Kripa, for that. I think the important thing to remember about a casino, some people are saying, it's really going to help. There would be no new tax money coming in to anybody, whether it goes to the state or the county or both, for at least 6 years, maybe 7. So this is at best a long-term thing. I do strongly oppose it. And the reason I oppose it is the long-term future of Tyson's Corner is spelled out in our Tyson's Comprehensive Plan. It is a very ambitious development plan and comprehensive plan that is looking to develop really the mixed-use communities, the business centers of the future. And the moment you put a casino into the place where it's being discussed, right by the Spring Hill Metro Station, you chase off any potential for a major employer to be anywhere near that casino indefinitely. And casinos don't get better with age. So we're not going to see an economic rebound because of a casino. If anything, my concern is it would go the opposite way. Melanie, you want to jump in on something?
I just wanted to say that I would like to thank our senator for who serves Reston area, Jennifer Boysko. She put it all out there for us for the casino as well as for JLARC amidst some very high political pressure. So I just wanted to thank her for towing the line for us.
Right on. Thank you, Melanie. And I have to say, other members of our General Assembly delegation who actually represent this area all came together. So thank you to all of them. Kripa also asked, speaking of transportation, how safe are we from the Transportation Secretary's desire to base funding on a place having higher than average marriage and birth rates and specifically giving more to do more to car dependent things and less to transit? Great question. Honestly, I don't know yet. I'm not sure. I would ask Joe or Katie, have we seen anything specific yet other than sort of at that 30,000 foot talk level on transportation? I don't think we have we?
Not that I'm aware so far. I know we're still applying for anything that we possibly can project related. And until we've been told otherwise, I think we'll just keep chasing any federal dollars we can that's still available to us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. But yeah, that's boy, yeah, that's one of the things definitely I am I have my eye on as well. Okay, another question from Diana Carter. It appears that these are the cuts for funding for police, courts, emergency services from pages 18 and 19 of the budget summary. Is this correct? Who is looking at how it will affect public safety? Agency 42, Office of the Independent Police Auditor, $11,521. Agency 43, Office of the Police Civilian Review Panel, $2,000 cut. Circuit Court, Records 1 FTE, $269,000. Juvenile Domestic Relations District Court, 3 FTEs, $258,000. Office of Commonwealth's Attorneys, 3 FTEs, $307,000. General District Court, one FTE, or maybe that's 1.5, I don't know. $108,000. Police Department, 63 FTEs, $11,500,000. Agency 91, Office of the Sheriff, 20 FTEs, $2.5 million. Fire and Rescue, 1 FTEs, $12 million. Department of Emergency Management and Security, $426,000. And then E911, 9 positions, 2.3. There's a lot there. I guess either Joe or Katie, could you talk through a little bit the process for how where did these cuts come from? Do these come from, I don't know, the radical left or me? Where did these come from?
Right. So the agency directors were asked to develop a 10% reduction options. So reductions started at the agencies. So directors and him or her senior level staff worked throughout the summer to come up with reduction options and then submitted them to the Department of Management and Budget. So we did work with the agencies very closely once the reductions were transmitted to us to try to analyze what the impact was and then reductions that we actually went forward with. So again, that 3.4%. So 10% was proposed. The county executive took 3.4%. So of that 3.4%, we did try to minimize what that impact would be. So a good example would be the three positions in Juvenile Domestic Relations District Court. Those 3 positions are associated with one of our residential programs. That residential program houses 12 girls, but we don't have 12 girls in the program and we haven't for many years. So the average number of girls is closer to 5 or 6. So we don't need 12 staff. So we've cut back the number of girls we'll be able to serve from 12 to 8. So yes, while that's a reduction, those positions are vacant or we'll be able to find a placement for, I believe they're all vacant positions because we haven't been staffing to that level. So now we're just sort of recognizing those savings with the 3 positions and then corresponding dollars. So I think we have actually our agency reductions and write-ups for all of these that I think we can put in the chat. I know Joe put a link in the chat. I think that might have been just to the budget summary, which is where it just lists the title or actually agency and then the position amounts. If you read through the agency reductions specifically, you can get a sense of what was taken specifically within each agency. And really, we tried to define what that impact was as well. So we will add that to the chat.
Thank you, Katie, and I appreciate that. And I think also part of the answer to this question is that's part of the process we're going through with the budget is these proposed cuts are out there, they're specified, and frankly, where people have concerns or they think we're making a mistake or, you know, it's impacting public safety, any of those things, tell us. You know, that's part of that's part of the process. I actually turned on Channel 4 this morning early and saw the head of the firefighters union talking about his concern about the ambulance reductions. And he was also talking about supporting the meals tax, to help make up, some of the cuts. So that's part of the process. And the more information I think we can have, the better, in order to make the best call. So thank you. Let's go through. We only have a few more minutes here, or at least are only scheduled for a few more minutes. Let's see. Helena, was Paul to discover recently there's a proposal to defund the middle school after school program. Kids are already lost socialization skills due to COVID and now need the after school programs. Okay, thank you. Ann says, thank you, Walter. Thank you, Ann. Stephanie, NCS proposed budget ending the value and prevention camp summer. Do you have any insight why this camp made the list? Katie, do you have any insight on that?
So this program is tied to middle school after school, and I believe it's run by the middle school after school coordinators or specialists who run the school year program. So there wouldn't be any staff left to run the program. So they're kind of linked together.
Okay. So frankly, if we save one, we should probably save both.
That's what I would say. Yes.
Yeah. Right. Okay, good. So my daughter is a student at the Thoreau Middle School, and participates in multiple after-school programs, including math counts and a Dungeons and Dragons club. Fantastic. We are grateful for these programs that provide enrichment and promote opportunities to socialize with peers in a safe, positive, and inclusive environment. We were shocked that the funding for these programs are at risk and would like to know how the FCPS would solve for the loss of funding. Yeah, we've talked, we're working on it. So try to make sure this continues. Okay, Kripa has a comment. The point of the Silver Line was to make us more like Tokyo or Amsterdam, not Las Vegas. No disrespect to Vegas, nor Reno. Thank you very much, Kripa. Appreciate I would throw that in. How much funding in the budget goes to DEI, staff, etc.? This came up a week ago. I believe, and I don't think I answered this, Katie, I believe our program is $1 million. Is that right?
$1 million.
3 staff.
Our Fairfax office is $1 million.
Okay, so yeah, $1 million. And frankly, I think it's been well worth it. It's really made a big impact in terms of opening up the county to all residents. So I hope we do continue that $1 million investment. Okay, and then Joe corrected the link. All right, I'm coming down the list here.
Katie sent it again too, so you got it twice.
Okay, we got it twice. All right, no problems. And then Steve says, well, I knew that Fairfax was slacking in law enforcement, but I did not know how much. This is basic to the government's purpose. Schools and community centers are not. Yes, there are many good alternatives to FCPS. How do you big government people justify this abrogation of basic police and court obligation at a time when all crimes of all types is prolific? Yeah, I think we've heard, these are cuts that are being put out there as suggested in tough times by department heads. And honestly, we have put a lot of money, as you've heard from the teachers union representative, into our police department, into our fire and rescue department. So I'm comfortable our record stands on its own. I don't have anything. I don't feel the need to apologize for that. Emily, Supervisor, appreciate your support of the meals tax. I was disappointed to see the meals tax advertised only at 4% and hope that the full advertised meals tax and real estate tax makes it into the final budget, because even so, FCPS will need to make deep cuts to be able to fund the first ever negotiated contract for instructional and operational employees. You're right on the numbers. Unfortunately, for this fiscal year, the decision to advertise only 4% on the meals tax is final. So we won't be able to revisit that for this fiscal year. So at this point, we pretty much set the boundaries of the tax rates. But I do appreciate your comment. Okay, Katie put the reductions. The correct link is up there. You'll see it in the chat. Lori says, thank you. Thank you, Lori. Isn't Fairfax County the safest county of its size in the entire USA? Yes, it is, Kripa. Thank you for pointing that out. We are the safest county of our size in the USA. And we're not perfect, but we do have a very good, solid tradition of safety, which I hope to see us continue. So thank you. Okay. There was some question about explains the impact to public safety. So Katie, I guess you were saying that the detailed impact discussion is in each department's budget?
Yeah, and I guess what I was saying is each impact we tried to, or each reduction within the impact, we tried to say what the impact would be specific to that reduction. It wasn't an overall analysis on public safety or specific to fire and rescue or the police department. That analysis was done at the agency level prior to them submitting it to make sure that they still would be able to complete their core mission and their core service delivery.
Okay, thank you very much. So just a couple more questions, then I think we're getting close to wrapping up. Jenny asked, curious how Governor Youngkin's Executive Order 47 aligns with Fairfax County's trust policy. The executive order is titled Keeping Virginians Safe from Dangerous, Criminal, Illegal Immigrants. You know, I'm not sure how it aligns. We have not changed our trust policy in Fairfax County. You know, if the state wants to change it for us, they'll have to change the law. Either that or, I don't know, maybe Youngkin after his term's over can run for the Board of Supervisors, but I don't recommend it. It's not a great job. But it's not a bad job. I won't say that either. So, but thank you for flagging that. That is definitely on our radar too. How much funding goes to climate issues? Do we, Katie or Joe, do we know that we have our Office of Energy and what is the budget for that office?
Yeah, I buy a little time on that. I know from a capital project perspective, we put roughly about $2 million in our baseline budget every year. We supplement that really primarily from our quarterly review one-off. So we add anywhere between about $8 and $10 million additionally for targeted specific projects. I don't know, Katie, look, if you can gather the OEEC operating budget faster, I think it's the basic challenge. If we could add more to our baseline, we would, but it's competing with everything else we talked about tonight. So I think if we go at it from a two-prong approach and keeping the base at 2, supplementing with the one-offs, I think those two abilities to have a combination of an impact on the capital side, and then consistently try to meet some of those targets of our operational energy strategy that the board, Supervisor Alcorn, as you know, want us to try to meet. I think both those approaches have been successful, just not as much baseline as we'd like.
Yeah, Joe, thank you. And I would also note that much of our climate work was frankly leveraging federal funding, which has been fantastic. It's going away, going away quickly. So it's going forward. This is going to be tough, and it's something we got to look at. I think we need to wrap up, but Melanie, take it away, and you can take the last word if you like.
Okay, well, thank you. I was just going to share that unfortunately our electric bus work has been paused. We were due to get federal funding, and that's now not going anywhere. No pun intended. So I think just regarding federal, I mean, I know it's alarming when we see whole Department of Education being cut. The very ironic thing is that the federal department only funds a very small percent of our budget, traditionally 7%. I do know that the superintendent is making plans to fortify our budget, and I am confident that we will continue to do the right thing for our kids. I don't know if other places will be able to do that, and including children and serving children with disabilities. So, but we are very focused on our daily charge, which is to educate children and make sure our staff have what they need. And so, while it is really quite unbelievable what's happening, I know that our staff, and certainly I am, we're trying to every day show up for our children so that our children thrive. That's what we've got to do. We are the economic driver. We're also becoming the most stable employer around. I have met so many staff members who had a federal spouse that now that staff member is the breadwinner. So ensuring that people can remain employed and, be able to pay their bills, not default on their mortgages. We are a very stable employer. So I just hope we can find some more solutions before the budget is adopted and plan for the future, whatever may come.
Melanie, thank you very much. I think that's an excellent close. I did just want to close with a process point, and this is not the last opportunity you have to provide input on the budget. I've learned some things tonight. I think Melanie may have too. Appreciate everybody bringing their thoughts and questions and concerns to this forum. We will also be holding public hearings before the Board of Supervisors, April 22nd through 24th. Go on the Fairfax County website and on the Clerk to the Board's website, you can sign up to speak at our budget public hearings. I'd encourage everybody who is interested and wants to engage to please do so. And then also we continue to take written comments. Paul mentioned earlier, Hunter Mill at fairfaxcounty.gov is the main office address here. And Melanie, I know you welcome comments and suggestions as well. So how can people provide you comments, Melanie?
If you go to my one webpage, www.fcps.edu/Meren, there's a form right there. It says submit a question. That's the best way because it will get logged and tracked, and I could make sure you get an answer.
Wonderful. All right, Melanie, thank you very much. I know you had some South Lakes things you had to do, but that was no problem. I think that worked out fine. And Katie, Joe, thank you once again for your professionalism, your knowledge, your diligence and patience, and for sharing your talents in public service to Fairfax County. So thank you both. And thank you everybody for being here tonight. Paul, thank you from my office for all your help making this happen, and everyone have a very nice evening.
Night.